Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order when you check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Sports Pictorium Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. If he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL helmet poster. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today we're going to discuss some of the greatest NFL playoff games from the 1970s. So, usually I do this in reverse order, but I think this time I'm just going to start right off with the number one playoff game, in my opinion, from the 1970s. Actually, I think it may have been one of the greatest I would probably put it in my top 5 greatest playoff games of all time. That would be the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Miami Dolphins. It took place on Christmas Day, 1971, the first round divisional playoff game. Kansas City had just won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and many people were predicting a third Super Bowl appearance by the Chiefs. Miami had reached the playoffs for the first time in 1970, but lost to the Oakland Raiders. So this game was played at Municipal Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm pretty sure that this was the last NFL game ever played at Municipal Stadium. In a contest that lasted nearly 83 minutes, the Dolphins and Chiefs went into double overtime in an epic battle in Kansas City. The Chiefs jumped out to an early 10-0 lead, but Miami evened the score before halftime. Kansas City regained control in the third quarter with a 15-play, 75-yard touchdown drive that took 10 minutes off the clock. But again, Miami came back to tie the score. The two teams exchanged turnovers before the Chiefs scored another touchdown on a 91-yard drive, which included a 63-yard hookup between Lenny Dawson and Elmo Wright. Then the Dolphins tied the game at 24 after a 71-yard drive with only 1 minute and 25 seconds left on the clock. Ed Podolak returned the ensuing kickoff 78 yards, and that run set up a 32-yard field goal attempt by Jan Stenerud. But the usually reliable Stenerud was wide right, and that was it for regulation time. In overtime, Kansas City took the opening kickoff, and another great return by Podolak put the ball at the 46-yard line. Kansas City got into field goal range, but the Dolphins blocked the 42-yard attempt. When it was their turn, Miami attempted a 52-yard field goal that fell short. The two teams exchanged punts before Dolphins fullback Larry Zonka rambled 29 yards to put Miami into field goal range. Miami kicker Garo Yepremian booted a 37-yard field goal to give the Dolphins the 27-24 victory. Ed Podolak of the Chiefs had an amazing game, 8 receptions for 110 yards, 17 carries for 85 yards, and 3 kickoff returns for 154 yards. His 350 all-purpose yards remain an NFL playoff record. Paul Warfield of the Dolphins gained 140 yards for Miami and 7 receptions, while middle linebacker Nick Bonacani had 20 tackles. Now we will go to the game that I consider the second best playoff game of the 1970s. This game was played on Christmas Eve, 1977. It was between the Oakland Raiders and the Baltimore Colts at Memorial Stadium in Baltimore. This was another game that went into overtime. It was a defensive battle early until Oakland's Clarence Davis scored on a 30-yard touchdown run. Colts defensive back Bruce Laird intercepted a Ken Stabler pass in the second quarter, returning it 61 yards for a touchdown to tie the score. Baltimore took a 10-7 halftime lead on a 36-yard field goal. Stabler reversed that score early in the third when he connected with wide receiver Cliff Branch for a 41-yard gain and then hit Dave Casper for an 8-yard score. It was a short-lived lead. Marshall Johnson returned the ensuing kickoff 87 yards for a Baltimore touchdown. The Raiders committed their 4th turnover of the day on their next possession, and things looked bleak. But Oakland's defense came up big twice, forcing a punt and then blocking the punt courtesy of linebacker Ted Hendricks. 2 plays later, Dave Casper caught a 10-yard touchdown pass, and the Raiders took the lead, 21-17. Baltimore came right back, scoring on their first drive of the fourth quarter, 80 yards worth, to go ahead again, this time 24-21. But Oakland would not be denied. Carl Garrett returned the ensuing kickoff to the 47-yard line, and then Stabler connected with fullback Mark Van Egan for a 25-yard gain. A pass interference penalty on Baltimore set up a touchdown run by Pete Banaszak. But the game was far from over. The seesaw battle continued as the Colts drove 73 yards for another touchdown to take a 31-28 lead. That's when the defenses stiffened and the teams exchanged punts. Oakland got the ball back with 2:55 left in regulation, and a 42-yard completion to Dave Casper brought the Raiders to the Baltimore 14-yard line. From there, a 22-yard field goal sent the game into overtime. Baltimore got the ball first, but was forced to punt. Then Oakland drove 41 yards and 9 plays to set up a field goal attempt, but Mike Barnes blocked the kick. The Colts offense stalled again, and Oakland drove to the Colts' 35-yard line. There, defensive end Fred Cook's sack took the Raiders out of field goal range. But Stabler kept the drive alive with a 19-yard completion to Cliff Branch. That play set up a 10-yard touchdown pass to Dave Casper less than a minute into the second overtime period. It was the deciding score, 37-31. Casper scored 3 touchdowns on the day. Stabler threw for 345 yards and 3 touchdowns. Marshall Johnson of the Colts had a solid game, gaining 134 yards on 3 kickoff returns and 16 yards on a punt return. Next week, we will continue, and we'll start with the third best playoff game of the 1970s. Until then, hope you enjoyed it, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network. your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.